The Cayman Islands is a trio of islands located south of Cuba and northwest of Jamaica, in the deepest part of the Caribbean Sea, making it an ideal location to explore the natural environment found under the sea. As we share stories of resilience, challenge, success, and hope. From the Cayman Islands, with its iron shore coasts interspersed with sandy beaches and enclosed by coral reefs. I am Dr. Tasha Ebanks Garcia, and I'm the Cayman Islands Government Representative to the UK. I'm delighted to be hosting One Planet Insights, a docu-series that shines the spotlight on the natural world around us and explores biodiversity and interconnectivity as we seek to understand how this all fits into the global ecosystem.
When people first went into space and they looked back on our planet, they realized that so much of our planet was actually covered by oceans.
The ocean is the lifeblood of the planet. This is a blue planet, most definitely. And all life on Earth depends on a healthy, functioning ocean and the marine environments and ecosystems that it supports.
Well, the oceans, our lakes, our rivers, all of our water ecosystems are literally the lifeblood of our planet. And they're not only important in of themselves, but they're obviously intimately connected to our lives as humans as well. Not only in terms of food and of transport and of their interactions with other ecosystems, but also, of course, in terms of the culture of the people who live and work alongside them.
It's very important for obviously regulating the climate. It's a source of food. We recreate in it. It produces oxygen and pumps it into the atmosphere. It's extremely important. It's a way of moving people, from one place to another. We can move through the oceans. So it's connectivity, but at the same time, it's also something that's really sort of fundamental to the survival of the planet. Healthy oceans are critical to the survival of our planet.
As somebody who myself was involved in protecting a marine eco park in the past, I saw for myself just how important it was to be understanding that marine environment first and foremost. Secondly, understanding the challenges and the threats that it faced, whether that was from overfishing or whether it was from climate change. But thirdly, what were some of the solutions that we could take not only to protect that environment but to enhance it going forward.
Almost everything we need as a species, and all species on this planet, depends on a healthy global ocean.
I think that sometimes we don't realize how fundamental healthy oceans are to our way of life and our own survival.
This planet is 70% marine. And so it's the biggest ecosystem on the planet. And it's really important that we don't forget it. As Sylvia Earle says, no blue, no green. And there couldn't be a truer saying. It's absolutely critical that we invest in the ocean. If we invest in the green on land, but we don't invest in the blue, the ocean, we are not going to get nature conservation and nature recovery and net zero. It's as simple as that.
The relationship between the people of the Cayman Islands and the sea has its roots in the early years of Caymanian history. Completely surrounded by some of the deepest waters in the world, teeming with marine life, the sea was an intrinsic part of early life for Caymanians.
In the 1940s, the only vocation that was available to Caymanians were to go to sea. And we became the best seamen in the world. I mean, if you read history, it'll tell you Caymanian seamen were the best in the world. We have had chief engineers who have been out to sea and acquire chief engineer status by the time they were 25 years old. So while they didn't get, I mean, in those days, even in my day, you know, I had much schooling because there was no high schools. Primary school was it. That's it. If you didn't get to go to Jamaica like I did, or some other country, your education was cut short because there was nothing else to do, you know. But the recruiting of all these seamen, once it started, then everybody got on board. 16-year-old guys wanted to go to sea, you know. Life at sea was hard, difficult. But if you wanted to learn something, that was the learning spot for it. And I wanted to learn, so within a very short time I started moving up the line, you know.
So many of us as Caymanians come from people who made a living going to sea, either fishing or going on large oil tankers and, you know, piloting those and being engineers, etc. So the ocean, the sea is very interconnected with Caymanian identity.
The true meaning of the sea for Caymanians, it's a way of life. It has ever been from I can remember. And people who are older than me, they say the same thing, so. But it has been good to Caymanians, the sea, the ocean.
The ocean covers just over 70% of the world's surface, supplies about 50% of oxygen in the world, acts as a vital source of carbon, and regulates the weather. Our ocean provides countless benefits to our planet and all the creatures that live here. How important is it to protect the variety of life in our ocean?
Biodiversity stands for biological diversity, and I guess in the simplest way of describing it, it is the variety of all life on Earth.
Biodiversity, of course, is the key to all of nature. It's how we evolve, how things have changed.
Biodiversity is the sort of wide variety of life forms that you can find anywhere, and that includes the oceans. So we're looking at from very microscopic planktonic forms to, you know, the largest animal in the oceans, the blue whale, and everything in between. And then we, of course, have structures that are like coral reefs, which are not just one animal, but many animals forming a very large structure.
Biodiversity is the engine which drives change and survivability on this wonderful planet.
There are a huge number of accumulative impacts on all species in the ocean. And it's really critical that we understand that those species matter in and of themselves, of course they do, but as we take out biodiversity, intentionally or unintentionally, from the ocean, we are weakening the most important ecosystem on the planet.
We know that healthier, more diverse ecosystems have greater resilience to the impact of a changing and heating climate. By conserving territory biodiversity, we can provide the best natural buffers against the ongoing threat of climate change and help build community resilience.
When you are snorkeling on the reef and you see an octopus crawling around looking for clams to eat, that's amazing. There is just a pure intrinsic value in that. It also speaks then to our soul, if people excuse the phrase. Studies have categorized that people feel better around healthy nature. Healthy nature is a biodiverse nature, something with lots of different plants and animals in one area.
These genes and species and ecosystems, they have evolved together over millions of years, and they all provide a particular function within the web of life. So we find the evidence is quite clear that those ecosystems that are more diverse are stronger, they're more resilient, and conversely, those that are being depleted and degraded become weaker, they become more vulnerable, more susceptible to disease, for example. And so biodiversity is absolutely essential for all life on Earth.
If we don't keep a biodiverse ecosystem, we're going to find that stuff that we took for granted, whether that's the ability to eat lobster that we catch ourselves, or its ability for a wetland to absorb floods, will not be there when we need it.
The Cayman Islands is a United Kingdom overseas territory. As members of the British global family, governments of the UK's overseas territories are custodians of internationally important habitats which span the globe from the Antarctic to the Caribbean, the Indian and South Atlantic Oceans to the Pacific. The overseas territories are on the front line of climate change. And for the Cayman Islands, climate change poses a major threat to every sector of our economy, every aspect of human life, and to our uniquely Caymanian biodiversity.
It is deeply unfair that the communities that have done least to cause climate change are bearing the brunt and are really on the front line of the climate crisis.
We know, for example, that the warming oceans that we're seeing now through climate change and elevated temperatures is a big driver for more intense hurricanes, for example, in our region. It's something that people here can connect with. We've all experienced hurricanes. We know the devastation. So the direct linkage between healthy oceans and our way of life and our own survival, I think, is probably, for me, best explained in that sort of very direct connection.
Unlike a lot of countries around the world, Cayman is actually living the changes now, and turtles are a really great kind of indicator of that. We're seeing, turtles are extremely complex creatures. We know that they have environmental sex determination. The warmer it gets, the more females there are, so the ability to impact the breeding distribution as a result of climate change is really significant. But the more immediate effects, the loss of turtle nesting habitat. Turtles need to come ashore to breed. We know that sea level rises are reducing the amount of beach environment that is available for them. We see storm inundation washing out nests, we lose nests, so the impacts of climate change are really happening now for turtles. So they make a really good flagship species to show you that climate change is happening.
The evidence is really clear that greenhouse gases caused from human activity is warming the atmosphere, and warming the atmosphere at an unprecedented rate, causing a series of consequences for the global ocean.
We know that the ocean is under pressure as never before from the triple threat of pollution from plastics and chemicals, from acidification, and from climate change. And tackling those triple threats is something that we are working incredibly hard internationally to achieve.
Marine ecosystems and the organisms living within them are highly interconnected and interdependent. When we consider the impact of warming oceans, rising sea levels, ocean acidification, droughts, and floods, what does this mean for habitats and marine wildlife that call the ocean home?
We know it's getting warmer, we know sea levels are rising, we know that ice caps are melting, we know that the ocean's getting more acidic, but we don't know all of the little interconnections that are happening along the way. We're working with groupers in Little Cayman, and we're able to show that they're already very close to the threshold of the temperatures. If those temperatures increase any more, it's unlikely that the larvae will survive. There are so many micro connections throughout the environment, throughout the ecosystems, that it's really scary to think of the repercussions and knock-on effects. So it's what we don't know that really worries me.
If you think about it, conch shells are calcium carbonate. How is acidification going to impact that? Are the shells going to be strong enough to resist predators? What's going to happen, for example, when certain species can no longer tolerate the temperatures for their larval life cycles, and they start moving north to get into cooler waters? It's striking when you're on a coral reef, or even just looking down at a coral reef these days. You can see the white, where normally you would see, mustard colors and yellow, brown, live coral tissue. What you're seeing is just the skeleton of the calcareous skeleton of the reef, which is why the corals look white. They've lost the living tissue that creates the color in them. So that's a very stark visual reminder of what's happening with climate change.
We also know that the temperature is going to keep rising a little bit at a time, but it is going to be at that point where the reefs become affected. We're already seeing this now with coral bleaching, basically killing off reefs around the world.
Some of them recover after a bleaching event, and increasingly we're finding that they don't recover very well, because the level of stress that our marine systems are under is just increasing every day, with overuse, pollution, over-extraction, and of course the impact of climate change and a warming planet generally.
We're going to see ocean acidification happening, and we know that this is going to weaken the coral structure itself. Without healthy live corals replenishing that coral structure, we can expect to see our reefs start to degrade, which means that they're not going to be as capable of breaking the wave impact from a big hurricane. That reef under there, when the wave comes over it, it kind of rips the bottom out of the wave, and we get smaller waves washing into the mangroves, washing into people's homes. Without a big, healthy ocean system, the whole thing will start to break down on us.
JNCC has been working with the overseas territories for the last 30 years, and the overseas territories are a real priority for us. In 2021, in the face of a new pressure on coral reefs in the Caribbean, stony coral tissue loss disease, JNCC felt that we could exercise our convening power and bring together partners to collaborate to help understand this disease and take action against it. We convened government departments, environmental NGOs, as well as academic institutions, and in 6 overseas territories in the Caribbean and the Atlantic. And we made sure that we brought to bear our experience as well as the partners' experience in terms of tools and resourcing. How do we understand this disease? How do we understand what causes it? How do we understand the impacts of this disease, as well as the other impacts that are already happening on coral reefs, and make sure there is a regional response, coming back to that idea, one global ocean, a regional response to this particular pressure.
One thing is for sure, that we can't just let it be. If the planet continues to warm, and that seems to be fairly certain because there's so much lag built into climate systems, coral reefs will not survive once we get past certain temperatures. That is well known. So the urgency of this situation and the urgency of trying to identify solutions has really never been greater for us.
In the face of these challenges, there are opportunities for protecting our environment while safeguarding our biodiversity and cultural heritage.
With the NASA Grouper project, known as the Grouper Moon Project, we have achieved something that was unimaginable.
The Grouper Moon Project is my favorite project in Cayman because we worked with the Department of Environment for 11 years on it. And my foundation produced not one but 2 different documentaries on it. It's the best success story I have seen in fisheries management and recovery in the Caribbean.
It started almost 20 years ago, and due to management strategies and principles that the Cayman Islands government have put in place, we've managed to write the blueprint on fisheries management of that particular species.
Interestingly, we first became aware of a problem with our Nassau grouper populations when, in 1986, I think it was, I went over to Cayman Brac to talk to the folks there about our first marine parks effort. And so I was making the pitch for, why it was important to protect our coral reefs and why marine parks would be important for us now and in the future. And the fishermen sort of came up to me afterwards and said, a few of the fishermen said, this is all really good, Miss Gina, but really, we're really concerned about the groupers. And I was like, well, what about the groupers? And the fishermen there said, well, we think we're catching fewer of them, and the ones that we're catching seem to be smaller.
Because Nassau grouper has always been the iconic species of the region, not only as a food source, which was pretty much why they were fished to the depleted, but they are the iconic species on reefs for our economy, for our tourism product.
So we started looking into this issue, and long story short, we did a lot of work back then, talking to fishermen, collecting population data, going out and getting otoliths from the fish so we could age them and have a population structure, etc. So we did a lot of science back then.
And basically what they did was identify the, the spawning aggregation sites of the Nassau grouper, which is one of the key species, key reef predators throughout the Caribbean. And they threw a legal fence around these reproductive sites, the spags in Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, and monitored them for over 20 years. And again, when you're dealing with a long-lived animal like groupers or snappers or sharks or billfishes, you can't study them for 1 or 2 years. You have to study them over decades to really get a handle on their life history. And that's what the government has achieved.
We put in place closed seasons, catch limits. Now the areas themselves are off limits and incorporated into our overall marine protected area systems.
Once the management plan was implemented and the fishery closure happened, the population has since made rebounds and is upwards of close to a low estimate of 8,000 and probably well north of 10,000. And we've seen the same thing mimicking in Cayman Brac, where the population was less than 500 fish, and now it is about 4,000 fish.
They're important species in terms of the whole dynamic of the coral reef system. So it's important from a food source, but it's also important from an ecological perspective that we actually protect those fish.
We, as a foundation, have exported this experience through the documentaries to places like the Bahamas and other English-speaking Caribbean islands. And they want to do the right thing. In 2017, I invited Richard Branson to come here. He came and he dived with us in Little Cayman. And he was part of our documentary. And he was blown away by what had been achieved.
The next sort of thing for us, I think, is going to be trying to understand what might be the impacts of climate change on these populations that we have worked so hard to protect and restore. Because we also understand that larval grouper actually have a thermal limit for their survival. And if we surpass that, then what happens to recruitment to these fisheries? Even in the midst of this tremendous success story, we're having to think about what can be a problem for us because of the warming oceans and ocean acidification as well.
In Cayman, we started the Stingray survey in 2002. The Stingray survey was the obvious choice because you have access to these animals 365 days a year. They are large, inshore, flattened sharks. They're predators of the shallow water environment, and people knew virtually nothing about them. And yet back in the mid-80s, this interaction had started through various means, fishermen feeding, cleaning fish at different places, establishing this connection with the animals. We started this study using 2 postgraduate students from Nova Southeastern University, where we were based for all our research. And they spent 2 years here, going to the sandbar every day pretty much. We tagged all the rays with a pit tag, which is a tag that you inject into the musculature of the base of the tail of the animal, so you can't see it, but you scan it with a scanner and you get a number. And I'm glad to say that there are animals around today that we tagged in 2002 that are still there today. So it just goes to show how long-lived the animals are, how site fidelity is so strong, and this is the key component to the entire relationship.
So the main reason for doing this study for such a long time is basically because stingrays, like sharks, are very long-lived animals, and to really understand their life history, you want to study them for a couple generations of rays. And if they live to 50 years, that's a very long-lived animal. You're going to get ones going from neonates to full maturity while the surveys are still going on. So we learn a lot about them.
So over the years, we have found that the sex ratio is very imbalanced. There's 7 females to 1 male, which is a bit of a concern. Why are there so few males? The females are obviously larger. They grow 5 times bigger than the male. We've seen them breeding at the site. They have their pups in shallow water. There's constant recruitment of new animals to the experience all the time. So every survey we do, we find animals neonates that are this size that have not been tagged, therefore not entered into the database. And it has led to this tremendous amount of information about the animals.
Plus, it's an open system. They're free to come and go as they want. So they're not dependent on us, we've learned. They can go and feed whenever they want. And all we've really changed is they're normally are predatory animals at nighttime, not daytime. But they are opportunistic. So they come here in the day and they go and sleep at night. How long have you been coming here?
Over 10 years now.
Yeah.
You know, at least a couple of times a week, sometimes more. Just as you can see, all the boats come in. We come in and we bring our guests and our tourists here and come and see one of what I think is one of the best places in Cayman or even in the world.
The territories support every one of Earth's major ecosystem types, including mangroves, coral reefs, and kelp forests. It is estimated that over 90% of known endemic British species reside in the territories. But sadly, the latest data shows around half of those species are at risk of extinction. The UK is proud to defend the overseas territories and to protect their ocean environments, mainly through DEFRA's Darwin Plus programme and the Foreign Office's Blue Belt programme. The scale of the challenge is huge, and one that the UK and the territories are uniquely equipped to fight together by working in close partnership. We're working in lockstep through those two programmes to protect and restore nature in the overseas territories.
And I think the schemes that we've been involved in together, whether it's through the Blue Belt or through other initiatives, show a really positive story about how the UK can work with UK overseas territories together to understand, to protect and to enhance our ocean environments to all of our benefit.
In September 2023, the Cayman Islands joined the UK's flagship Blue Belt program. This unique program aims to assist UK overseas territories in protecting and enhancing ocean health to halt biodiversity loss, enable sustainable growth, ensure climate change resilience, and connect people with the natural environment.
We were very excited in the Cayman Islands to see what the Blue Belt program was doing in other overseas territories, and the ideas that we could take from that then to repeat in Cayman and take those skills and initiatives and learning and bring it home, really. And so it was a very positive step for us when we signed up for it, looking at the marine protected area work they were doing in other countries, what we could learn from in Cayman, and looking towards how do we move our marine management regime forward.
When we put the marine parks in place in 1986, climate change was not on the horizon for us. So many things weren't, invasive species, stony coral tissue loss disease. So it's been really critical to be able to not only get the funding to help us do that work, but to also then be able to, through the grant program, get expertise from the UK to bolster the expertise that we have here locally, and help us develop programs that have, really been critical to us understanding going forward what we need to do to try to protect our resources.
The Cayman Islands was ahead of the curve when it comes to marine protections. The first marine protected areas in the country were designated almost 40 years ago. Today, an impressive 55% of our nearshore coastal waters are protected through an enhanced marine protected area network, the majority of which are no-take zones. But further out at sea, we know our pelagic species and environments are at risk, and with the support of the UK's Blue Belt programme, the Cayman Islands Department of Environment is taking a closer look offshore.
But one of the first things we've been able to do with that program is join the GOAN network of baited remote underwater video camera systems, particularly aimed at pelagic fish. We've had deep water swordfish coming up to the surface, and being spotted on these bruvs. The tuna and wahoo, which we all love to fish for, seeing how many of them are coming through our waters, and of course our pelagic sharks. Cayman, we're well known for our sharks. We've had a long shark monitoring program going. We've been a shark sanctuary for many years now, with all sharks being protected in all Cayman waters. But now this GOAN network of pelagic bruvs is letting us see what are out there, particularly things like oceanic white-tip sharks. We've got a few of them in the videos already, and that's really caught people's attention because this is a top-end global predator whose numbers were huge, have been hugely reduced over the decades, so just a small fraction of what they used to be. And so we knew from other work that they were in Cayman waters, but to have them start popping up on the video cameras almost right away was very encouraging, and it was showing how Cayman can be an important part of global conservation. What we have in our waters is part of the Caribbean, is part of the world, and us doing our part to manage it properly is very important to us.
As we reflect on the past, consider the challenges of today, and look to the future, the question that remains is, what gives you hope?
But what gives me hope is, there are resilience. We do see corals out there that have survived. We do see scientists working to come up with solutions. We do see a government that's helping us, trying to come to terms with, supporting us with coral restoration projects. So we're not going to give up, and that's what gives me hope. We're not going to give up.
Marine systems are extremely resilient, and if you give them a break for even a year, no access at all, no extraction, no people, they will bounce back.
And my particular hope always comes from younger people in our communities who not only understand this, but have passion, ideas, innovative ideas about how we might go forward.
When you look at the history of the people of the Cayman Islands, we have rolled with the punches and changed socio-economically every time we've had to. We have, as a country, grown up with our environment. As our environment changed, often in response to what people were doing, we changed with it and adapted. And so we're going to have to do that now again with climate change coming. We kind of got a good idea of what it's going to mean for us. In this case, we can now look ahead and see these changes coming and say, okay, to make Cayman good, not just for the mangroves and the fish, but for the people, for the next 10, 25, 50, even 100 years, here's the changes we need to start doing now. And that makes me hopeful that we have the people who know this, and we have the opportunity to make those changes now.
The Group of Moon story is the shining light of hope, because where we all play together, it can work.
When we work together towards a common cause, we will overcome profound challenges and accomplish the remarkable, and that gives me hope.
I think given me hope is, thousands of different projects and committed individuals and communities who share that passion for protecting our oceans and our biodiversity.
I think hope is always about possibility. It's always about ingenuity, imagination. As a species, we've done so much good, so much bad. But actually, we have an enormous capacity. And if we focus that capacity, that imagination, the possibility to reimagine a different future, then I am full of hope.
I feel that with all of us working together, there's a lot more hope, that we will find a way to cope with the challenges. We just have to.